just to make sure we're clear on the military family education program, that is going to be something that we're planning on continuing annually, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so are there 3 additional staff positions?
Yes, sir.
And that's not just for the rollout of the program. We expect them to be on board?
No, so those would be enduring positions. So currently, I believe we have 3 positions managing the EAP portion. We feel we'll need another 3, and we actually feel this will be, we're going to get a lot more participation in this program anticipated because it will be able to affect more people. You know, essentially, when we're bringing in soldiers and airmen under the EAP program for recruiting purposes, we have a large number of our guardsmen that never go do a college education. So even though they signed up for it, they're eligible for it, they end up never actually executing it or going to college. We feel a lot more people would be interested in this program because it's for their family, it's for a spouse, or it's for a kid. So we see this, you know, if this was to go into effect, you know, the day it goes into effect, we see it really that the enrollments in this we see are going to spike huge. Because I think we're going to get a huge number of people that are going to want to take advantage of this program. So the enrollments are going to go way up very quickly. But many of those people are not going to execute that. So I give you an example of say it's a 25-year-old guardsman. Their spouse already has a college education. He re-enlists for this. Let's say he has a kid that's only 1 year old. They're going to sign up for it this year. We're not actually going to have to pay to send them to school for another 17 years.
Right.
So we're going to see enrollments go way up, and then eventually we'll settle back down because once we get 6 or 7 years down the road.
So you feel comfortable with the staffing of the 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And then in your answer also you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, which was certainly we've had our share of natural disasters in this state, and I'm a lot of people know, but I'm sure also there are those who don't, how active you have been in terms of the National Guard in helping our communities. Do you have any statistics or even just provide a general update on how that has affected the National Guard this past year? Yeah,
you know, so every other day that we spend away from our families or civilian jobs is another sacrifice. And if you look back at the numbers, historical numbers from 10 years ago, we might go through an average year with only activating 100, 200, maybe 300 guardsmen to state active duty. Now consistently we're way over 1,000. This year approaching 2,000. You know, last year alone in March, this month last year, we had 3 snowstorms that mostly affected northeastern Pennsylvania, but we activated 180 members in the first storm, 550 in the second storm, 570 in the third storm. Okay, that was over 1,000 people just in March alone. That's Pennsylvania. Hurricane Sandy, we're all over New Jersey, New York, because we are the largest in the Northeast. So if there's a disaster here on the East Coast,
more than just in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania has to go. We went to Texas for the hurricane there. We went to Florida. We went to Puerto Rico. We went to the Virgin Islands. If people need help, you know, those governors call Pennsylvania and say,
and I think that's critical for our people to understand, is that this is not just a Pennsylvania, yes, through the Pennsylvania National Guard, but we are truly one of at the forefront of so many in the nation of being able to help out in those.
But I mentioned this in many of my speeches throughout the Commonwealth. You know, they get that call at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's 2 feet of snow on the ground. They look at caller ID. They know it's us calling them, and they know what we want. But they still answer that phone. They throw on their uniform. They dig themselves out of their own driveway. They get to that armory, and for the next 3, 4, 5 days, they're out there digging people off a highway. They're going door to door, and their own family is stuck in their house. They don't have electricity. Nobody's shoveling them out. You know, so when that guardsman's done that duty, he goes home, and he or she goes home, and then they got to shovel their own family out. I mean, that's what we're asking of these people constantly, time after time after time. You know, it's tough. It is not easy being in the National Guard.
And then very briefly, could you give us, as I finish up with my last question, just an update on our current overseas deployments or what we're anticipating for this year?
Sure. I'll let each of the services brief theirs. General Schindler, if you want to talk Army real fast.
Sure, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Sir, to address our current deployments, this year we have a 1928th contracting team, small team, but it's currently scheduled to deploy to Afghanistan. We have about 160 soldiers from the MP company. They are currently deployed right now in support of Operation Spartan Shield. And we have about 18 other individual soldiers that are out there doing individual missions, but they're all in a Title X overseas capacity. In 2019, we have about 530 soldiers from our 3rd of the 278th Armored Cavalry Regiment. They're going to deploy to Poland on a Title X mission. And we have about 50 from our 2nd of the 104th Aviation, 2 companies that are going to deploy to Afghanistan in that capacity as well. And then there's about 20 individual soldiers that will take individual deployments in service to Title X missions around the world.
All right. Thank you.
General Reagan, if you'll address the air.
Absolutely. Currently, we have roughly about 188 airmen currently deployed overseas to Afghanistan and other overseas locations. Some of them due back here in the next month or two. And for next year, we anticipate about 250 or so will deploy overseas in support of Title X in the coming year.
Thank you.
I'd also like to add that on the Air Force side, as we sit here, we have airmen in Pittsburgh on Title X Homeland Security Alert. It's 24/7, 365. We've been doing it since 9/11. And then Horsham on the other side of the state, on the Philly side, we have a remotely piloted aircraft mission there. So there are guardsmen 24/7, 365 in that facility flying aircraft halfway around the world doing combat ops from Pennsylvania. So even though they're not going overseas, they're still on a Title X combat mission.
Well, thank you, and I know I speak for my colleagues and all my constituents. We can't thank you enough for the job that you and the men and women who serve do for all of us. So thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.